Your future wealth already exists, but not in your bank account. It exists somewhere far closer than that. Closer than your job, closer than your opportunities, closer than the world you see every day. And the strange part is this: you might already be living it, just not in the way you think. There is a version of you that is not struggling, not waiting, not hoping things will change. That version is already calm, already abundant, already certain. And every single night, without realizing it, you step into that world and then walk away from it before it can follow you back. This is where things start to feel a little uncomfortable. Because if that future already exists, then the only real question is, why are you not experiencing it yet? Stay with me, because what comes next will completely change how you see your life. Most people will never hear this, not because it is hidden, but because they stop too soon. There is a quiet moment every day that almost no one pays attention to. A moment when your mind becomes open, soft, deeply impressionable. A moment where the line between what is real and what is possible begins to blur. And in that moment, something powerful happens. You start choosing without knowing you are choosing. Some people fall into fear. Some fall into doubt. Some replay the same problems over and over again. And slowly, night after night, they build a life that looks exactly like those thoughts. But a few people, very few, begin to understand this moment. They realize it is not just sleep. It is not just rest. It is a doorway, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Because this is where the paradox begins. The life you want is not something you chase. It is something you step into, quietly, repeatedly, from the inside out. And here is the part that no one tells you. Your mind does not wait for reality to confirm anything. It accepts what you give it, especially in that final space before sleep. Especially when you feel something deeply enough. By the end of this, you will understand how your assumptions before sleep are shaping your future wealth, how your subconscious is quietly building a life based on what you accept as true, and how a simple shift done consistently can begin to move everything in a different direction. Not overnight, not like magic, but in a way that feels almost too real to ignore. So if you have been feeling stuck, lost, or like something is missing even though you cannot explain it, then this was meant to find you. Welcome to the channel. And if something in you is already starting to recognize this truth, make sure you subscribe, because this is only the beginning. There is a life you are already living, and no one ever taught you to notice it. It shows up in quiet moments, in the conversations you replay in your head, in the way you drift off and suddenly become someone slightly different, more confident, more at ease, more certain. It happens so naturally that you overlook it. But that version of you is not random. It is not meaningless. It is a glimpse. Do not skip this part, because this is where most people make the biggest mistake. Your mind does something extraordinary. It creates entire experiences without asking permission from the outside world. When you think about a better future, you do not just see it, you feel it, even if only for a second. That feeling is not fake. It is your inner world responding as if it is already real. And here is something very few people know. Your brain does not clearly separate imagined experiences from real ones when emotion is involved. That means the conversations you have in your head, the small victories you play out, the moments where you feel successful or at peace, they are quietly shaping how your mind understands reality. You have already been rehearsing your future without realizing it. There are nights where you drift into sleep and everything feels possible, where problems fade and a different version of you takes over. A version that speaks differently, moves differently, believes differently. And then you wake up and it feels like it disappears. But it did not disappear. It stayed exactly where it was created. That is the hidden life, the one running beneath your daily routine, the one built from your thoughts, your feelings, your inner voice. And the truth is, you visit it every single day. Think about the last time you caught yourself imagining something better, not forcing it, just slipping into it for a moment. There was a calm there, a quiet certainty, almost like this is who you are supposed to be. That feeling is not accidental. It is familiar for a reason, because somewhere inside you, that version already exists. Not as a distant dream, but as something you are already touching, again and again in small, unnoticed moments. And once you start seeing it, once you realize you are not starting from zero, everything begins to shift in a way you cannot explain yet. And what I am about to share next, nobody talks about this. But it changes everything. There is a single moment every day where your future is being decided and you are not even aware of it. It is not when you are working, not when you are planning, not when you are trying to fix your life. It is the moment right before you fall asleep, when everything slows down, when your guard drops, when your mind stops arguing and simply listens. This is where the sleep assumption paradox begins. Do not skip this part, because this is where most people make the biggest mistake. Right before sleep, your mind enters a state where it becomes highly suggestible. Not weak, just open. In that state, whatever you assume to be true, even quietly, even for a few seconds, begins to sink deeper than logic. It does not question, it does not debate, it accepts. And here is the surprising part. Your subconscious treats those final thoughts as instructions, not imagination. It starts organizing your perceptions, your reactions, even your opportunities, around what you impressed on it in that fragile moment. So if you fall asleep thinking about lack, you are not just thinking, you are rehearsing it. If you drift into sleep feeling uncertain, you are not just tired, you are reinforcing that identity. But if in that same moment, you step into the version of you that already has what you seek, something different begins to happen. It feels small at first, almost too simple to matter. But deep inside, something shifts, because your mind does not wait for proof. It moves based on assumption. And this is where it becomes personal. Think about your nights, the thoughts that follow you into silence, the worries that repeat without permission, the quiet doubts that feel so real you stop questioning them. You did not choose them consciously, but they have been choosing your direction. And that is the paradox. You are shaping your reality most powerfully when you feel like you are doing nothing at all. Here is the truth nobody says out loud. You were never stuck because life was against you. You were repeating patterns in the only moment where your mind listens without resistance. And once you see this, you cannot go back to sleep the same way again. Because now the question is no longer if your assumptions matter. It is which ones you have been carrying into the night without realizing. And what comes next will show you why most people unknowingly keep themselves exactly where they are, even when they desperately want change. The reason you feel stuck is not what you think. It is something you are doing every single night without realizing it. It is not your effort, not your intelligence, not even your circumstances. It is the quiet pattern that repeats when the world goes silent, when you finally lie down, when your mind begins to drift. That is where the trap lives. Do not skip this part, because this is where most people make the biggest mistake. Most people fall asleep in the same emotional state they are trying to escape. They replay problems, they revisit conversations, they feel the weight of what is missing. And here is the surprising part. The brain processes negative thoughts more deeply before sleep than during the day because there are fewer distractions. That means those final feelings, fear, doubt, lack, sink in stronger than anything you thought earlier. So without knowing it, you are not just ending your day, you are programming the next one. It becomes a loop. You wake up with the same heaviness, the same patterns, the same reactions, and it feels like life is not changing, but something is changing. It is just happening underneath your awareness. And this is where it hits harder, because it is not that you are not trying. You are. You think about improving your life. You want more. You even take action sometimes. But every night you return to the same internal state and it quietly cancels out everything you tried to build. It is like planting a seed during the day and digging it up every night. That is why it feels frustrating. Like you are moving, but not getting anywhere. Like something invisible keeps pulling you back. And once you see this, it creates a different kind of urgency, because now you realize this is not about doing more. It is about becoming aware of the one moment where everything is being reinforced. The thoughts you allow before sleep are not harmless. They are instructions. They are shaping how you see yourself, how you respond to opportunities, even what you believe is possible for you. And if that pattern does not change, nothing else truly will. So the real question is not why you feel stuck. It is why you keep returning to the same state every night, even when you want something different. And what I am about to show you next will reveal the hidden science behind this process, the part that makes all of this not just believable, but undeniable. There is a reason this works, and it is not just belief. It is how your mind is built. At first, it sounds almost too simple. Thoughts before sleep shaping reality? It feels abstract, maybe even unrealistic. But the deeper you look, the harder it becomes to ignore. Do not skip this part, because this is where most people make the biggest mistake. Your brain is constantly filtering reality. Every second it decides what matters and what does not. And here is the surprising part. It does not choose based on truth. It chooses based on familiarity. Whatever you repeat internally, especially with emotion, your brain starts to treat it as important, as real, as something to look for. This is not philosophy. This is pattern recognition. If you keep assuming struggle, your mind begins to highlight proof of struggle. If you keep assuming opportunity, it starts noticing possibilities you once ignored. The world does not suddenly change, your perception does. And that shift quietly changes your actions, your reactions, your results. But there is something deeper here, because beyond psychology, there is a layer that feels almost unexplainable. A subtle alignment between what you feel internally and what begins to show up externally. Not instantly, not magically, but consistently enough to make you question everything you once believed about reality. Here is the truth nobody says out loud. Your mind is not just reacting to the world, it is participating in shaping it. And this is where it becomes personal again. Think about how long you have carried certain assumptions about yourself. Not good enough, not ready, not capable yet. Those thoughts did not just stay as thoughts, they became lenses, quiet filters that shaped every decision, every hesitation, every missed chance. It was never that opportunities were not there. It was that your mind was not trained to see them. And the moment you begin to understand this, something shifts. Not fully, not instantly, but enough to spark a question you cannot ignore anymore. If your brain accepts what is repeated as truth, and your inner world is constantly rehearsing something, then what exactly have you been training your mind to believe all this time? And what I am about to share next will take you even deeper into this hidden process, into truths about your mind at night that most people will never discover. There are things your mind does every night that would completely change how you live, if you actually understood them. Most people go to sleep thinking nothing important is happening. Just rest, just another routine. But beneath that silence, your mind becomes more active in shaping your future than at any other time of the day. Do not skip this part, because this is where most people make the biggest mistake. First, your brain becomes highly suggestible right before sleep. Not weak, just open. The critical thinking part of your mind slows down, and the deeper layers begin to listen. That means whatever you repeat in that state, even casually, goes in without resistance. It is not being judged. It is being accepted. Second, emotion matters more than logic. This is where it gets interesting. You can tell yourself something positive all day, but if it carries no feeling, it barely leaves a mark. But one strong emotional moment at night, fear, excitement, relief, that gets recorded instantly. In fact, studies show emotionally charged thoughts are stored faster and recalled more vividly than neutral ones. Your mind does not prioritize what makes sense. It prioritizes what you feel. And third, your subconscious cannot clearly distinguish between imagination and reality when the experience feels real enough. That means when you internally live a moment, when you feel it deeply, your mind starts to treat it as something that has already happened. Here is the truth nobody says out loud. You have been programming your life every night, not through effort, but through feeling. And this is where it becomes real for you. Because think about it. Those nights when anxiety feels overwhelming, when doubt feels heavy, when you lie there replaying everything that is not working, you are not just thinking, you are imprinting those feelings into the deepest part of your mind. But the opposite is also true. That same mind, that same doorway, can work in your favor. And the moment you realize that, something shifts from helplessness to control. Quietly, powerfully, because now you are not just someone hoping for change, you are someone who understands where change actually begins. And what I am about to show you next is how to meet the version of you who already has everything you are seeking, and bring that version closer than you ever thought possible. There is a version of you that already knows how this story ends. And it is not the version you see in the mirror right now. It is the one who has already crossed the distance you are still trying to figure out. The one who does not question their worth. The one who moves with quiet certainty. Not because life is perfect, but because something inside is settled. Do not skip this part, because this is where most people make the biggest mistake. People try to chase success as something outside of them, something far away, something they need to earn. But the truth is, your mind connects faster with identity than with goals. That means it is easier for your brain to become someone than to chase something. This is why small shifts in how you see yourself can create massive changes in what you experience. So instead of focusing on what you want, begin to notice who you would be if it was already yours. How does that version of you think when things go wrong? How do they speak to themselves in silence? How do they carry themselves when no one is watching? This is not fantasy. This is familiarity waiting to be built. And something interesting happens when you stay with it long enough. You start to feel it, not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet sense of, this feels right, like stepping into something you forgot, not something you are forcing. The doubt softens, the urgency fades, and for a moment, you are no longer trying to become that person. You are being them. Here is the truth nobody says out loud. The version of you that you admire is not separate from you. It is a pattern your mind is ready to accept if you allow it to. And this is where the connection deepens, because now it is not just about wealth. It is not just about success. It is about identity, about stepping into a state where abundance feels normal, not distant. The more real you make that version internally, the less foreign it feels externally. And slowly, something begins to align. Not perfectly, not instantly, but enough to make you pause and realize something is changing. And what I am about to share next is the exact moment where this shift becomes powerful. The one window where stepping into that version of you can start rewriting everything. There is a moment every night when everything about your future becomes quietly negotiable. It is not dramatic. It does not feel important. But it is the most powerful transition your mind experiences all day. The space right before sleep, when thoughts slow down, when resistance fades, when your inner world becomes the only world that matters. Do not skip this part, because this is where most people make the biggest mistake. This is the critical window where your mind stops analyzing and starts accepting. A surprising fact most people never realize is that brainwave activity shifts into theta state right before sleep, the same state linked with deep learning, memory encoding, and subconscious programming. In this state, repetition is not required for change. Intensity is. One single assumption, held with feeling, can begin to redirect how your mind organizes reality. And this is where focus becomes everything. Because in that quiet space, you are not fighting old thoughts the same way. You are not trying to force belief. You are simply choosing one direction to settle into, one version of yourself, one feeling to carry forward. And that choice, even if it feels small, is not small at all. It is identity in motion. Think about how many nights have passed where your mind drifted without intention, where worries filled the silence, where uncertainty became the last impression of your day. You did not notice it at the time, but those moments were shaping the tone of your life. Now imagine something different. Imagine you end the day with one steady assumption. Not forced, not exaggerated, just calm certainty. A quiet sense that things are aligning, that you are becoming the version of you who already knows how to move forward. At first it may feel subtle, almost like nothing is happening. But beneath that surface, your mind is organizing itself around that signal. And once that begins, direction changes before results do. This is where determination starts to form naturally. Not from pressure, but from alignment, from repetition of identity in the most receptive state you have. And the strange part is, the more consistent this becomes, the more your waking life begins to reflect it in ways you did not plan for. And just when you think you understand how deep this goes, there is another layer most people completely miss. A reason why this moment before sleep is far more powerful than anyone realizes. There is one reason most people give up right before everything starts to shift. And it is not lack of belief in the idea itself. It is the feeling that it does not feel real yet. That quiet discomfort when you try to think differently before sleep. That small voice that says this is just imagination. That sense that nothing is actually changing. It feels like you are doing something wrong, when in reality you are standing at the edge of something new. Do not skip this part, because this is where most people make the biggest mistake. Here is something surprising most people do not know. When the brain is introduced to a new belief, it often triggers a temporary resistance response. Not because it is false, but because it is unfamiliar. Your nervous system is designed to protect what it already knows, even if what it knows is limiting. So when you begin to assume a new identity before sleep, one where things are improving, where wealth feels closer, where you feel more capable, your mind may initially reject it. Not because it is impossible, but because it is new. And this is where doubt shows up. It tries to convince you that nothing is happening, that you are just repeating words, that you are wasting time. But what it does not tell you is that every real change begins in this exact phase, the uncomfortable in between where the old identity is fading but the new one has not fully formed yet. And if you stay with it, something important happens. Relief begins to replace resistance, because you stop expecting instant transformation. You stop demanding proof in the same moment. You start understanding that your mind is not broken for resisting change, it is simply adjusting to it. And that changes everything, because now you are no longer fighting yourself. You are allowing space for a new pattern to take shape, quietly, gradually, without force. Here is the truth nobody says out loud. The feeling of "this is fake" is often the first sign that something inside you is actually starting to change. And once that realization settles in, courage begins to form. Not loud courage, not dramatic, but a steady willingness to continue even when it does not fully make sense yet. And what you are about to discover next is why this invisible shift does not stay invisible for long, and how it slowly begins to show up in the real world in ways you cannot ignore. There is a shift that begins long before your life ever looks different, and most people miss it completely because it is invisible at first. It does not announce itself. It does not feel like progress. It feels like nothing is happening at all. But beneath that stillness, something is quietly reorganizing the way you think, respond, and move through your day. Do not skip this part, because this is where most people make the biggest mistake. One lesser-known fact in psychology is that identity change rarely begins with external results. It begins with micro-perception shifts. Your brain starts noticing different details, interpreting situations slightly differently, and reacting with small variations that you would normally overlook. These tiny shifts accumulate long before visible change appears. And this is where patience becomes important. Because at first you are still the same person on the surface. You still wake up in the same place. You still deal with the same challenges. But internally, something has already started to soften. The urgency begins to fade. The emotional weight of old thoughts starts to loosen its grip. And then something subtle happens. You start catching yourself thinking differently. Not dramatically, just slightly. A moment where doubt does not feel as solid as it used to. A moment where possibility feels a little more natural. A moment where your assumptions before sleep begin to echo into your daytime awareness. And this is where trust begins to form. Not trust in results, trust in process. You stop needing immediate proof. You stop measuring every day as success or failure. Instead, you begin to notice patterns, small shifts in how you respond to stress, how you view opportunity, how you speak to yourself when no one is around. Here is something most people never realize. When your internal state changes even slightly, your external behavior adjusts automatically to match it. You start making different choices without forcing them. You start avoiding certain thoughts without effort. You start moving toward things that align with your new internal direction. And that is where quiet excitement begins to appear. Not because everything has changed, but because you can feel something changing. A sense that you are no longer exactly who you were, and not yet who you are becoming, but somewhere in between. Something real is unfolding. And what comes next will reveal why this invisible shift eventually becomes impossible to ignore, because it starts showing up in ways that feel almost too precise to be coincidence. There is a point where everything you believed about reality quietly starts to loosen, and most people never notice it happening. It is not dramatic. It does not feel like awakening. It feels like a small internal expansion, like your mind is no longer trapped inside the same old conclusions. The world does not change first. You do. Do not skip this part, because this is where most people make the biggest mistake. One surprising fact from neuroscience is that perception is not a direct recording of reality. It is a reconstruction. Your brain constantly fills in gaps, interprets signals, and builds a version of the world based on expectation, memory, and emotional state. In other words, you are not seeing reality as it is. You are seeing reality as you are. And that changes everything, because if perception is flexible, then reality is not as fixed as it feels. It is responsive. It shifts through attention, belief, and emotional alignment. Not instantly, not magically, but consistently enough to notice patterns over time. This is where expansion begins. You stop treating your current situation as permanent. You stop assuming your present identity is the final version. Instead, something opens inside you, a sense that you are participating in reality, not just living inside it. And with that shift comes freedom. Freedom from rigid labels. Freedom from the idea that your current state defines your future. Freedom from the emotional weight of this is just how things are. Because once you see that your mind is constantly shaping interpretation, you start to realize you are not stuck in reality. You are interacting with it. Here is the truth nobody says out loud. The moment you change what you consistently assume about yourself, you begin changing what reality reflects back to you. Not because the world bends instantly, but because your awareness starts selecting different possibilities from the same environment. And that is where power begins to form. Not control over everything, but influence over your inner direction. A quiet certainty that you are no longer just reacting to life, you are shaping how you experience it. And once that realization settles in, something deeper starts to emerge, a question that most people never think to ask, but once you do, you cannot unsee it. And what I am about to share next is the final layer that reveals why this entire process begins long before you ever notice it. There is a quiet truth running through everything you just heard. And it is not something outside of you. It is something you have been participating in all along without realizing it. From the hidden life already forming inside your thoughts, to the way your mind shapes reality through assumption, to the subtle power of what you feel before sleep, every part of this journey has been pointing to one simple realization. Your inner world is not separate from your outer experience. It is the starting point of it. Everything begins there. And maybe now something feels different. Not because your entire life has changed in this moment, but because the way you see your life has started to shift. The idea that your thoughts before sleep matter. The understanding that your mind responds to assumption more than struggle. The awareness that you are not as stuck as you once believed. That is the real transformation. Not instant results, but a new awareness of where results actually begin. And if you take nothing else from this, take this one thing with you. You are always in a state of becoming. Every night, every thought, every emotional assumption is quietly contributing to the direction of that becoming. The question is not whether change is happening. It is what direction you are allowing it to take. Before you go, read this one last thing carefully. This might be the most important thing in this entire video. You do not need to force a new life into existence. You only need to stop reinforcing the one you are trying to leave behind and begin even gently to assume the reality you want to step into. Especially in the moments when your mind is most open, especially before sleep. That is where everything starts to shift. Here is the truth nobody says out loud. Everything you just heard, you already knew. Deep inside. You just needed someone to remind you. So tonight, instead of ending your day on autopilot, pause for a moment. Notice what you are carrying into sleep. And for once, choose it with intention. Because the life you are waiting for is not as far as it seems. It is closer than your next thought. If this message resonated with you, support the channel by liking the video and subscribing. Not because it is required, but because it helps this kind of message reach someone else who might need this same reminder right now. And as you move forward from here, carry this question with you quietly. If your future wealth already exists, why not step into it tonight?